Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a weeknight evening in January when everyone's busy and tired and everything. So we really appreciate you coming
Ain't
out.
nobody got their video on?
I'm hearing somebody. Sorry, if everybody could mute, that would be great. Thanks. Sorry. I do like presenting. I miss teaching. I taught virtually my last year teaching, so which I adapted to, and it was a lot of work, but I do enjoy presenting to parents. I'm a parent myself of a daughter with medical issues. I also have experience in Montgomery County. I was a RITSE at a middle school, and I also was a resource teacher at an elementary school, and I also was an IEP coordinator at a residential treatment center in Montgomery County. So the counties I taught in, just so you know, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore, and Prince George's, also in DC at more than one location, and also Fairfax County. I kind of did the Goldilocks route. I tried different ages, different grade levels. Let me try this year. Let me try that year. So I've made a list, and I've actually taught at all grade levels, pre-K through 12. So that gives me interesting perspectives on goals, objectives, present levels, case management. So I really want to present this tonight as if I'm the case manager and I'm in a meeting and we're trying to work together to find the best IEP or the most appropriate IEP, the most comprehensive IEP, the most thorough IEP for each child. That's really how I approach whether I'm talking about, advocacy, whether I'm talking about expert witness work, or whether I'm, thinking back to when I was teaching. So I'm always looking at it from putting my case manager hat on, thinking, how would I approach the situation? So if we can proceed, we'll talk about what we're going to go over tonight. And today, these are the topics. I want everybody to know their terms. In IEP meetings, I think it's really essential when IEP school staff in a meeting is using different terms, that everybody knows them. We'll get to that in a second. When we talk about alignment, I'm looking at goals and objectives as part, almost like I think of it as a train, and these are different train cars, and we've got to get that train moving, that entire IEP. So I think of the goals and objectives as, two of those train cars moving ahead, and I think of the engine often as present levels of performance, and we'll get into that a little bit later, how if we don't have great present levels of performance and thorough and comprehensive ones, then it will be very hard to move forward with goals. I want to slow my cadence down a little bit. I tend to speak very fast, and I do want to kind of pause and just regroup and go over the first slide. So I want to make sure we're going over knowing our terms, looking for alignment. I want to make sure that we're looking at needs and strengths. Often strengths are not discussed, but yet they can be used to address needs. So I really want to go over not only that we should include strengths, why we should include strengths, but how strengths relate to needs. And data collection, you're looking at data every time you see your child. You're indirectly, maybe not even aware of it. Data is going on all around you. It's asking the right questions, writing the right things down, anticipating what data to collect, and that is how we're going to collect good data. Next slide, please. And I have my same slides here in case we cross wires. Okay, so the next slide is going to be on some common terms that I find are used sometimes by school staff, and they kind of just gloss right over them. Somebody will say in a meeting, well, so-and-so's decoding rate is this. So, little Jeremy's comprehension rate is not the same as his decoding rate. And they will keep talking and keep talking. We know how these meetings go. It's a set agenda. And then often it's after each section, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Really, when you get that draft home and you see words that maybe there's some inconsistencies or things aren't matching, just stop, flag it, get yourself a highlighter, flag that. If you're reading the IEP online, just make a note, page 4, line 3, talking about fluency rate here, this grade level. Then we're talking about comprehension rate, this other grade level. What's going on? We're looking for alignment. We're looking for things that aren't consistent. And then we might find out there are 2 different assessment tools used. One, straight decoding, read this list. Another one, comprehension, 2 different tools, 2 different scores, 2 different grade levels. We're all scratching our head. So don't think when you're confused that other people aren't confused. They might just put it in the box and keep moving, because unfortunately there's a lot of paperwork to do. There's a lot of data to collect. They've collected data, they put it in. They might not sit and wonder about the data. They might not wonder about those inconsistencies. As the parent, you have the zoom out capability, looking at those trends. Why on the qualitative reading inventory did my child score on this grade level, but on Fountas and Pinnell or a different, running record with the teacher, or for tutoring at home or whatever, or after school, there's this other grade level? Look, ask those questions. Ask them, well, could you tell me what you mean by when you say? It doesn't have to be necessarily, obviously, anything contentious when you're asking a question to clarify something. When they say student will benefit from, student needs manipulatives. Well, that's great. Thank you for letting me know. Could you give me an example? Then they might say, we mean sentence strips. We mean math manipulatives. We mean tens and ones blocks. So really find out what they mean when they're using these terms, because they might, unfortunately, sometimes be taking it from a prior IEP, saying, that's still working, let's keep that in, that sounds good. But what is their interpretation? So I realize everybody on this Zoom is probably very informed, very knowledgeable, understands and identifies these different terms. It's really important to know what the IEP team means by these terms, especially the sort of nebulous ones like a student may benefit from. Does that mean that they need it, or does that mean it could help them? A lot of students, for example, may benefit from a break, small group reteaching, extended time, may benefit from. Does that mean the student needs it? So again, clarify those keywords that could have different meanings, because those meanings have impact on how your child's educated. So when you see those words that could be interpreted where maybe they need it, maybe they don't, they may benefit from it, ask for those words to be adjusted. You can say it in a very collaborative way. Could we reword that to the student requires small group reteaching for new science terms? And then the team may go, sure, that's fine. Or they may say, no, we just think sometimes that might help, but it's not required. It's really important when you get that draft IEP 5 days in advance, which Maryland residents, your 5-day rule, really look at those words where you're wondering, could they be misinterpreted? Could they have multiple meanings? What does this look like in the classroom? And again, I understand the challenge of the IEP team. They have a set amount of time to get that meeting done to get that document complete. They might say, we have 2 more sections to go over and we have another parent waiting. Do you want to go over this now or do you want to reschedule? Take the time you need. Know your terms. So, for example, the second term on here is fluency. I've seen fluency misstated as accuracy, where I could probably read a list of, I don't know, German words accurately, but I can't read them fluently. I can't read them with expression. I can't read them in a non-robotic way because I'm just trying to pronounce them. So even looking at fluency versus accuracy. Accuracy, I can read a passage and it's correct and I sound like a robot. That's not fluent. I can read a passage with expression and pause at punctuation. Do you hear the difference? So again, when a teacher writes that a child is fluent, what does that mean? And decoding, well, they can decode this list of words, but they comprehend at this level. Are they two different tools? Again, we're not trying to pick on anybody on the team. We're not trying to put them on the defensive. We're not trying to criticize their choice of words. We're trying to clarify so that everyone understands what your child's plan is. Even checking for understanding. Does that mean someone is going to write that down, that the child knows the directions, the child knows the due date, the child knows new vocabulary? Some children literally need check for understanding for what is the assignment. There could be a substitute in there who needs to know that in the subplans. You need to go over and ask Norman, ask Lachey, ask Randy. Do you understand what to do? Okay, tell me. Okay, we're supposed to. Okay, so make sure the IEP team and you are all on the same page in your terms, and you'll have a much more productive meeting. Next slide, please. This is an area where I think a lot of people want to leapfrog right into goals when they get in a meeting. I think that's our tendency, that we just want to do all our beginning housekeeping, our introductions, et cetera, due process. And then we want to go right to goals. I think that's just the instinct of a lot of IEP teams. But if there's something in present levels, and I'm abbreviating it as PLOP instead of all of that longer acronym, but I know what the longer acronym, I was actually, this is kind of funny. I had another webinar, I can't remember the exact group. And I said, we're just going to call it the PLOP. And someone wrote in the chat, well, it's actually called the whatever. It was really cute. I was like, unfortunately, I know it's just very long. So we're just going to call it the PLOP. If something's in the PLOP that your child does very well or needs help with, if there's a need area on that first page, second page, wherever it's put, and then it's not in the present levels, or it's in the present levels, and then there's no goal, there's no supplementary aid and service, there's no accommodation, you want to make sure it's aligned. Again, when you get that draft, zoom out, connect those dots. People are busy. I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge teachers are working double time. They're staying late. They're working through lunch. They're covering for their friend who has a doctor's appointment who couldn't get a sub. I understand that. I respect that. So if there's something missing, I wouldn't assume malice. Let's be thorough. Say, oh, I was just wondering. The occupational therapy evaluation mentioned these supports, their need areas in the present levels, but then I was just wondering, I didn't see any goal related to it. I didn't see any accommodation. I didn't see supplementary aid and service. Where do you think we could put that? So you can bring things up in a meeting without going, you left this off. This is not a good idea. There are ways to kind of, Jedi mind trick, get the team working and moving forward, but really look at that alignment. Look at and see something was in here last year and now it's gone, but the child still needs a goal or support in that area. By the same token, if there's a strength that they're not acknowledging somewhere, that's very, very important. It's important because it shows a starting point for learning. And I've said this in other presentations I've presented to other parent groups. I was teaching in Howard County in the early 2000s, and there was a young scholar, I call them all scholars, young lady with Down syndrome. Again, I'm not saying names or schools or years, but it was a very distinct memory for me because her case manager, who didn't teach her at all and didn't work on her IEP, she walked by as we were teaching. I'm minding my business, working out in the pod. People are working. I had a table doing multiplications with beans, gluing beans on cards, making sets. She stopped me, said, I need to talk to you. It's okay. I'm thinking, what's going to happen? Is the fire alarm going to go off? Am I, do I have broccoli in my teeth? What's going on? All kidding aside. She said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing pull out, I'm reteaching. It's my first year in that school. So I'm doing multiplication. This is how I've done it with other groups in other buildings. Why are you doing that? I said, well, because that's one of the standards for this unit that she said, don't you know that children with Down syndrome only go past second grade math and they plateau? Why are you wasting your time? It was that was the gist of it. It was wasting your time, plateau. I knew I couldn't curse in front of the children or have a blow. And I said, thank you very much. I've got to get back to my instruction. And then I knew just to avoid that person, whether it was at lunch or whatever. My point is that child had a lot of strengths that I drew on to have a foundation to teach her how to multiply. She was very curious. She liked to count. She liked art. She liked to manipulate materials. A lot of students like art, are curious, and like to manipulate materials. A lot of students, both on and off IEPs, have difficulty with multiplication and need a visual and need to see, oh, how many sets? Oh, how many in each set? Wow, what it is all together. I actually think teaching multiplication is easier than teaching addition. I think it's easier than teaching subtraction because it's a pattern and they can see the increased results with the set. So my experience has been it's actually easier to teach multiplication. So again, this child had strengths. She would do an activity if you put things in front of her and gave her a model. I'm going to do it this way. She would copy me. I might be writing a note to somebody and she would want to copy me. So again, use those strengths. Make sure it's in their present levels, that they're curious, like manipulatives, will copy things from a model. And then, no, not multiplying yet, but getting those emerging skills, and then is able to multiply. So make sure those present levels are very rich with needs and strengths. So we have a foundation to move from as we educate the child. And I'm going to go on to the next slide. And then
Liz, there is one question.
Oh, sure. Great.
So MCPS is moving away from leveled texts and possibly the Fountas Pinnell testing can't even think of what the name of the, just one of their modes of testing. Instead, they're using structured phonics instruction. Do you know how that might impact change the impact on language and wording of an IEP? If they're moving to more towards the structured phonics. And and this is speaking specifically to a mom who has a 5-year-old who's going to be entering kindergarten in the fall.
Sure. It's very interesting because my second and third years of teaching, I was in and out of MCPS throughout the years. I was at an elementary school that shall go unnamed, and I was sent to reading training. And you go to trainings because you're a new teacher and you want to learn. And I remember it was Fountas and Pinnell. And I remember going, how am I going to explain to parents that their child went from level 7 to level 8, or for whatever it was then, level G to level A, whatever, or why they're not going that way? And it didn't make sense to me. And I remember we leveled text, and I spoke up multiple times, and I ended up using a different program. So the thing about leveled texts is leveled texts are very, I'll just say my little spiel on leveled texts. Leveled texts are not content controlled. There is no scope and sequence. So if you're in a program, for example, like Spire, which is based on Orton-Gillingham methodology, you have a scope and sequence. The child must learn this before they learn this. These words down here are going to be part of these words. So what you're going to see if they're moving away, you hear different rumors and different schools are doing different things. And then one school's like, no, we're going to keep doing this. I think what you're going to have is you're going to have more exact data. I think you're going to have more content control. My biggest problem with Fountas and Pinnell has always been there's no content control. And I remember this very vividly. There was a book that someone leveled that was put in a basket in my resource room. It was 1998. And it had the words officer and tarantula in it. And it was a very low level. And I said, why is this low? And they said, because there are picture cues that the child would know officer and tarantula. And I was thinking, these children haven't been taught the components of those words for officer or tarantula. And then you're going to, mark them wrong because they didn't, a tarantula, they could think it's, spider, fuzzy, furry. Officer, they could say, policeman, cop, helper. They could say anything. So again, I think what you're going to see for moving away from Fountas and Pinnell is a strict scope and sequence where the child is truly rated on if they have this foundation, then they move up here. Everything is based on what they've learned before, and they don't move up until they've mastered the current material. Fountas and Pinnell and the leveled readers, it was very subjective, the leveling. And again, I don't want to have this presentation be a science of reading presentation. I know everybody's very aware of the different controversies and Fountas and Pinnell and the studies, but those are the two big things I think you can expect are you have a clear scope and sequence. So if you see a specific knowledge gap, you can hone in on that and find out why that child's not learning that and maybe reteach that skill or that unit and then move the child along. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Sure. And then we'll go back to the slides. And again, if I'm going too fast for anybody, please let me know. I told people earlier, my grandparents came from Ireland. I tend to be using my hands when I talk, and I might speed up a little. So strengths in the IEP, I really want parents to focus on this area. Strengths and preferences are not the same thing. 1 year, an extended school year in a non-Montgomery County IEP, I saw for strengths the child's favorite restaurant and an activity they like to do in terms of like walking or running or something. And I was like, are they good at that? I know that's a preference, but is that their strength? And preferences are important too. Preferences are very, very important. We want to know, oh, this child is very, very interested in, I had a little friend 1 year, a third grader in Prince George's. He could tell you everything about cheetahs that had probably, that was ever on like, Animal Planet. And it was great because you could literally get some text about cheetahs and have him interested and have that be a hook. So again, what they're interested in and they prefer can relate to strengths, but we really want to know, what can your child do? Yes, what are they interested in? What background knowledge do they have? What skills do they demonstrate? And there's another slide in here talking about sort of attributes. And I think that's very, very important because a lot of children don't have some attributes that some other children do have, and we need to give them credit. We need to give a child credit who is outgoing and friendly and cooperative, because unfortunately, there are some scholars that aren't those things. So we need to give those children credit. Hobbies, however obscure, whether they like rock collecting, whether they like Roblox, whether they love Fortnite, or they love, to go to Home Depot with their grandfather and help watch him build a birdhouse. Children are interested in something, and we'll talk later about interviewing and kind of pulling that out of them. Give them credit for this. This could be the hook for a lesson. But again, preferences, a lot of children love, chocolate ice cream and, chicken nuggets. We really can put more in an IEP than their favorite food? Come on. I think we have to work a little harder as an IEP team. We have to pull more information out. That's kind of an aside that their favorite restaurant is, whatever. But really, I want to know more about what they prefer, what they, in terms of academics, what in terms of skills, what have we seen? What do they hope to do? Who do they look up to? Who do they gravitate towards? I had a young scholar in DC several years ago. His behavior always wasn't perfect. And then one day I just asked him, I said, at your house, who's your favorite person? He said, my grandmother. I said, who's your second favorite person? His Chihuahua. So again, anytime I needed him to refocus, get his work done, have that goal, I would always say, think of grandma and think of your Chihuahua. I can't remember the name. I wouldn't say it. But again, find what that child likes, what that child believes in, what that child, hopes to do, and include it. It can help. And next slide, please. Again, these are some of the things that we just talked about. Strengths tell a story. And I have found, unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true, so I have to acknowledge it, that school staff tends to doubt parents with disabilities, parents with children with disabilities, when they say, my child can do XYZ. It's almost like they want verification or proof, like you're applying for a mortgage and you need proof of income. I find that school teams don't question parents who have children who don't have a disability. If they say little Bradley is on a travel soccer team, the teacher isn't going to go, no, you're not, Bradley. You're not on a travel soccer team. But yet it's curious, if there's a parent of a child with a disability and they're asserting certain skills, they're saying that they've seen certain capabilities, certain things demonstrated, they're doubted. And that's very upsetting to me. Include your child's strengths. Give them credit for what they know. And as I said before, they can be a starting point for a need area. If they're really interested in art, that can help in language arts. If they're really good at drawing, and I've seen several children over the years who had really, really excessive challenges with reading, who could draw or who could choose colors or who had a real strong sense of, putting colors together. If they have those strengths, that could be a starting point for a need area. That can be, well, maybe for the book report, you are going to use the computer to draw a picture. You are going to pick out a frame for your drawing. We have to draw on those strength areas and put those with the need areas to move the child forward. If you give a child, any child, a blank piece of paper and say, write 5 paragraphs on this, write 3 paragraphs, the little ones, little scholars, write 2 sentences. If you give that same child a sentence starter and say, oh, I gave you the first 3 words and I gave you a word bank, very different reaction. I don't care what age, what capability. Give that child that first sort of little push, not training wheels, but just sort of that. It's almost like a, what's that when you bake bread, the starter. Give them that starter. Have that hook. What is that child's strength? Maybe they love the zoo. Maybe they love, like I said, watching their grandfather, their grandmother, their cousin, their sibling do something. They have those strengths and those interests. Oh, I got the email, Sheila, from your mom. You all went to the zoo this weekend. Wow. Instead of this writing prompt, if you want, I'm going to write some words down about the zoo and we're going to write about that. Make that connection. Have the learning be accessible for the child. Have that strength be a starting point. Oh, wow. Maybe we could talk about habitats. Maybe you can tell us on Friday afternoon after we practice, you can share some of the things that you saw when you went to the zoo. We can pull it up on the laptop and you can point to some of the pictures of those animals, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. This is very important, and I find that this is true for children with disabilities and children without disabilities. They're not taught to name their strengths. They're never given the opportunity, and they don't know what to call it when they do well with something. They don't know the specifics of it. We need to name those for them, whether it's a child with or without a disability. And often they don't have modeling of that in school. They don't have somebody standing there and going, my name is, Sheila Smith. Sheila's my middle name. And I'm very proud that I baked lasagna last week. Okay, now you come up here, Roger, you say your name and something you're proud of. What is pride? We really have to model and instruct on these specific things. And as parents, don't downplay these attributes that many, many children have. And they just don't have the chance to show these skills. They just don't. They don't have the chance to stand up and maybe show off a program from somewhere they went that weekend. They don't have a chance to show a photo of a dog that they're taking care of, or maybe they're helping a neighbor, or maybe they're learning a math skill. I know there's something in the chat. We really have to name these skills, these attributes for these children, no matter what age, no matter with a disability or without, because nobody is doing that. And I don't know if it's teachers are so busy and they're getting through, this quiz, this test, this writing assignment, and they're grading and their heads are down and everybody's busy. It's like we have to stop and reflect and look at each child and go, wow, I just noticed that so-and-so went over and organized all the cubbies without being asked. I just noticed that so-and-so helped a friend who was frustrated on a test. Whatever it is, we have to name that. And I know children coming back from virtual learning, they didn't have that in-person opportunity for somebody to notice them and see all of those things going on. They were a face on a screen, turning in things virtually. And then they're coming in and they're learning the school environment. They're learning, they may not have had that named. What is empathy? What is being curious? Oh, today we're going to do this in science. If I'm teaching a science lesson, I remember one year it was, I was just looking up stuff. It was a private school in DC, children with behavior challenges. And I really needed some help with engagement. So I was looking up different experiments and what can I do with vinegar and whatever. And some children were not making the best choices, but when they had a science experiment in front of them, everything was on that experiment. And they were curious. And I said, wow, you all are so curious. They're not. What does the word curious mean? Oh, it means you're interested in something new. It means you're paying attention. It means you want to know more, really defining those. And they're like, yeah, I am curious. I said, yeah, you are. And that's a really good thing. And then tomorrow, maybe we'll do a different experiment. Maybe we'll compare it. So really let them know what that is. Be very deliberate. If your child's at home helping with a recipe, they're being cooperative. They're helping their sibling. They're helping with chores. Again, give them credit because some of our friends and scholars are still working on those areas. So everything they can do, we need to give them credit for. I did want to pause because there was something in the chat, Brooke. I just didn't know if it was a question. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it was not a question. It was just an agreement saying, yes, action pictures of our children or home videos can help to document some things that our children can do. Very important, their strengths and interests. So just in agreement with what you were talking about.
And I think, and I want to reiterate, it's almost like people shouldn't have to feel like they have to prove, oh, my child can do this. My child is capable to do this. There was one young friend during ESY in a different county with Down syndrome, and I'll never forget because I'm a very competitive person. And we had an end of year summer celebration. And the second year I went back to extended school year, he had not been in my class the first year. So he was in my class the second extended school year. I did not know him during the year. I just had his IEP. And this young scholar was not, and again, I'm not saying names or schools. He was not, he didn't speak very often. And I'm very, very competitive. And I wanted a really good end of summer performance out of my group. So I never took dance classes when I was little. I was always that kid that wanted to like be goofy or be silly sometimes. So I found a video and I said, it was like day one of extended school year. I said, we're going to learn this. And he blew everyone away. And what I kept hearing from people was, we didn't know he could dance. We didn't know he could dance. We didn't know he could dance. And I remember thinking to myself, why didn't anyone give him the chance to dance? So he was in the front. It was like, if you picture like a V, like a flock of geese, he was in the front and he was the star of the end of summer celebration. And again, where was that opportunity? And the fact that his speaking skills weren't where his peers were really was a detriment to him demonstrating intelligence. And so we want to have different opportunities for different children to show skills, intelligence, and aspirations. Who wants to be up here? Come up. You can participate by getting up and doing something. You don't have to write down, I want to get up and dance. I'm a good dancer. I had no idea when I started that day. And I remember I had the wrong clothes on that day. I think it was like the only day that summer that I don't know why I wore heels. And I'm like, I'm going to do it so they'll do it. And I remember, I was getting a little sweaty and I was like, we're going to do this routine. And I had we had the projector so all the kids could see the routine, and we had to go over it a few times. And of course, my experience with dancing was minimal, but I'm like, we're going to do this. And again, he had to have that opportunity. Yeah, another person in the chat. Yes, I think Brooke, right. It's important for teachers to find ways to connect with students. Yes. So this one, I think we can go on to the next one. I think I've covered this pretty well. The goals. I know a lot of people have been to a lot of seminars on goals and objectives, and I don't want to bore anybody with structure. So this is kind of a reminder. You want to look at all areas on page 1 where you want to have a goal. This is just a reminder. If you see reading comprehension as a need area, and then you don't see a goal, we got to put the pieces of the train together. So this is just an example. Given a text at Cassie's reading level, she will identify the main characters with 75% accuracy in 3 out of 4 trials as measured by work samples and quizzes. For your quarterly progress report, as you do your home collection of these goals, you want to see those work samples and those quizzes. You want to see text at Cassie's reading level if you're Cassie's parent. And you want to ask in the IEP meeting, what is her reading level? If you all, and again, it doesn't have to be acrimonious. If they're saying they're giving her a text at her reading level, they better be able to tell people what her reading level is, or when they're implementing this goal, how are they going to choose which book to use? So again, look at all terms in here. Take it apart. If it doesn't make sense, or if you have a question, or if you don't think you're going to be able at home to understand when they send work samples home, how that goal is measured, or which goal this goes with, then please ask the question. And again, if reading comprehension is there, we want to see a goal for it. Next slide, please. And again, this formula, I'm sure this is, you've seen this ad nauseum. This is the formula. Basic meat and potatoes. What will a student accomplish? Under what conditions? By when? How does everyone know they'll have accomplished it? And do they look like the goals from last year? If they look like the goals from last year, then why? You want to go back to those present levels and see how often they were addressed, what approaches they took. Are you seeing your child accomplish this goal at home and they're not seeing it at school? Or vice versa. At school, they're going, oh, we don't need to include this anymore. They've mastered it. Well, if that's still a need area, then need another goal. And if they look just like the goals from last year, do the present levels look like the present levels from last year? Again, that is the engine driving the train, the present levels of academic and functional performance. So everybody should be able to read it. If the special ed teacher goes out for whatever reason, gets transferred to another grade, their grandmother's sick in Boston, whatever, can someone come in, a long-term sub, and understand that IEP and implement it? And can you get samples at home of work and know, oh, this goes with goal number 4. I see how my child is progressing. It should be, everybody should be speaking the same language of that IEP. Next slide, please. And students need to be given time and space to demonstrate their skills. If you see a child at home at the kitchen table and they need a minute to respond for that math question, that writing prompt, that reading prompt, maybe they need an extra minute at school. So if you have data that your child is performing that skill at home, but it's not going on at school, what is different? What is different? You just want to pause and ask. I just need some water. And again, if the child needs time to formulate the answer, they still get credit for that answer. They just needed extended time. So again, when we talk in a couple slides about you're collecting your data at home, under what conditions is your child able to demonstrate that response? Or if the school is saying, we don't need to work on that anymore, the child knows that under these conditions, you want to see also, and I know the classroom's different. I know there's visual distractions. Our little friends are getting up and sharpening their pencil. It's time to go to lunch. It's early dismissal. But if you're seeing your child perform a task, demonstrate a skill consistently over and over with certain conditions, and the school's going, no, 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 we don't see it. Well, maybe that's small group without distractions, with encouragement, with reminders. A lot of it, children get home, put their backpacks down, go play, whatever, go watch TikTok, have their snack. Maybe they need that break first. Maybe it's right after a break they're able to demonstrate this. One-on-one, they're able to demonstrate this. Under what conditions? They need to be given the time and the space and the conditions. So you want to be looking at those supplementary aids and services in addition to your accommodations. Next slide, please. So we talk about data collection as a parent, and parents go, oh, I don't really have a lot of data. I just have what's sent home. I challenge you and say no. I say you do have data. And we're just going to talk on this slide about how you're organizing your data that you're getting from school so that you're prepared for those annual reviews. Any staff emails, those are very rich with data. Look for those keywords that you also see in the IEP. Look for adjectives that in an IEP meeting or beforehand, you want to seek clarification on. If you're hearing that your child is struggling, not motivated, not interested, frustrated, I don't know what any of those look like. They're not nouns and verbs. Frustrated could be, I'm in the Starbucks line and I dropped my debit card out of my car. And I feel like, oh man, I'm frustrated. Frustrated could be a kid throwing a textbook because the sub came in and said, it's indoor recess, but we need to get our work done and finish our work. So we're not going to go to recess till you get your work done. That's frustrated. Okay, so when they're saying your child is XYZ, ask for information. If you see emails about your child's behavior, their engagement with their work, how hard the work is for them, keep anything positive, negative, moving towards those IEP goals, or maybe it's data that's not yet addressed in the IEP that you're assembling that maybe there needs to be an additional goal. So a lot of times parents have data and it's either sent back because school staff says, send this back, or they don't see the long-term value of that data snapshot. And maybe it's not a singular piece of data that might have meaning to you. I say, take a picture of it anyway. You might start to see patterns. If you get 5 running records or something, or emails about them over a 3-month period, that's 5 data points on that topic. If you have 5 pictures in your phone of those work samples that come home in a homework folder, then you have a really good data point. one of my biggest concerns and frustrations, both as a colleague, as an advocate, and as a IEP coordinator, was when we get into present levels to write goals, sources aren't cited. What date did the child do this? According to what teacher? What did the teacher say? You know, on March 17th, Mr. Smith, the art teacher, emailed back the following information on class participation, work completion, independently getting started with work. If you get an email, etc., if you get an email from the PE teacher, so-and-so didn't want to participate. Anytime I see something about motivation or something where people assume, did the child say, I don't want to participate today? Was the child tired, hungry, thirsty, maybe just took a spelling test, whatever? It's always okay to ask a clarifying question as you compile your data. Oh, thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate that data. Could you give me more information on why you believe that James did not want to participate? And then, well, he just sat there and didn't come out, you know. So really fine tuning those pieces, those snapshots of communication is really, really important, because I don't want parents to wait until the meeting and have to do a lot of clarification that you could do in advance. You could do this sort of fine tuning of the data, especially those emails, especially graded work. If they write, you know, did not complete, or did not want to complete, or was not interested, ask those questions ahead of time and take those notes and keep all the work samples, or take a picture, email it to yourself so you know the date. Obviously, keep prior IEPs, prior progress reports, and just like present levels, progress reports should cite dates and sources. The vague generalities of, you know, Gary has been unable to participate, whatever. Okay. Oh, thank you for again, you don't have to start a contentious back and forth communication sort of you know, flow to get more information to prepare for those annual reviews. You know, find out then, oh, please, thank you for sharing. I always do. Thank you for letting me know. Could you please clarify this? So you have to decide, are you a digital parent for data collection? Are you a paper parent? Are you a combination? Are you a hybrid? You know, you get all those papers that come home. Maybe everybody's busy. Who wants to take the time to take pictures of all that? You run to the dollar store, Target, get a binder, just stick the date, you know, came home. And then if you send an email to ask for clarification, just jot a note, send an email, because often lack of response, that's a data point too. If you're emailing the music teacher or the media teacher or the math teacher or the, you know, second grade classroom teacher or whomever, the general educator specialist, whomever, the speech pathologist, and you're emailing and for whatever reason there's no response, that's data point also. So again, as you approach the annual review, you're going to get the draft IEP sent home. It's going to have present levels. It's going to have draft goals. And then you're going to have all your data. You're going to have your data, and we're going to go into the next slide. But you know, I don't want you to think you have to pick digital or paper. It's really whatever is quickest and easiest for you. I'm a big spiral notebook with Post-its, color coded, but I'm also a digital person. I will typically, you know, type during an IEP meeting and jot down notes. That's just me. So you pick whatever system is quickest for you, but definitely clarify that data in real time. You know, if somebody's saying something and it's confusing you, or it doesn't match the IEP, or maybe it's an indication that maybe they're not getting their break. Maybe they're not getting extended time. Maybe they're not getting checked for understanding. Maybe they didn't have something read to them. Again, asking for clarification, that's a data point too. And then if they say, well, they never want extended time, they never want a break, ask those clarification questions on that as well. Next slide, please. These are some of your areas that augment what the school is collected, and some of these are listed, in both areas in terms of what you're getting from the school and what you're collecting on your own. I'm just going to scroll down so I have the same thing here. And this is really important because, again, you're seeing your child. Yeah, if you could go back to the prior one. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. You're seeing your child how many hours a day? You're seeing your child when they're not, quote unquote, having that academic demand placed on them. Sometimes children shine when they don't have that pressure and that stress. If they're at home and they're rocking their math homework, they should get credit for that. I really want to look at this book. Maybe they've had their, had their break, watch their video, watch their funny YouTuber. They've had their, their snack, and now they really want to, I really want to get into my homework, and I'm very excited and I'm engaged. They should get credit for that. So even if you send an email to yourself, twice a week, Alexandra was, just got right started with her homework, completed it all, or she needed a break. That's a data point. She needed a break and took a break. She got started. It was after, after one prompt. It was after a snack. Some children need multiple prompts. Some children might be like, oh, I need to go feed the dog, or have different other reasons to not do their homework. But if your child's getting started right away or not, that's a data point. Send an email to yourself, jot it down in a notebook. However, homework completion, if you're setting aside X amount of time for homework and day after day after day, it's not enough time, then maybe that's not a good, match for what they're expecting at school. Maybe that's also going on at school. Maybe there are tasks at school that are given that child, for whatever reason, is not able to complete that task in that time. So that child would need extended time. Verbal commentaries. When you hear people talk about your child, strengths, needs, etc., that's data. When you have somebody in a doctor's office say something, out in the community, church, synagogue, temple, out at Target, oh, what a polite young man. When I was still teaching, if I'd be in Target and I'd see a little angel in a shopping cart, I'd walk by them and go, oh, I'm a teacher. I'm verifying that's a very well-behaved young man. You're doing a great job, Mom. And they'd smile. And then you might see another friend having the alligator tears because they didn't get their Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Well, you have a great day. When you hear from other people what they're observing about your child, oh, your child's so cooperative, your child's so friendly, your child is loves to help, your child is a problem solver, your child loves pets, your child really, you went to the library and the librarian was sharing a book with everybody and your child was very engaged. Those are all valid data points. Community activities. This one is so broad, and especially coming back, from virtual learning, this one is a challenge because people, social distancing and things like that. So some people now, even like look at the COVID rates now, community activities, that's been inconsistent and that's been a challenge. But anything your child's interested in, or even participating in virtually, that's a data point. Work samples, again, you're getting those from school, and sometimes the staff collects those, sends them on, grades them, sends them on, maybe doesn't document each one as an aligning data point with a specific goal. Maybe you're going, wait, I'm seeing that my child is struggling with literal and inferential reading. I need to let the teacher know. Maybe they weren't even putting 2 and 2 together. Some teachers send those daily check-ins, just half page, all page. Some write it in the homework folder on a Friday. Some write a weekly email, what the class did this week. Those are interesting data points too, because then you can look at your child's work samples and go, oh, good, they did everything the teacher said they were working on. Again, I talked about this in a prior slide. Teacher emails, so rich with data. When they take the time to write positive, negative, in the middle, whatever that is, that's a key data point. Write down the date. Write down, March 10th, email from math teacher, talked about this. Then when you're going to that annual review, you're not digging for that email. Collectively, they tell a story. If you have 3 different adults in a building, all saying the work is too easy, too hard, your child's head is down, your child is the first one with their hand up, whatever, that's a data point. That's a collective data point. Often, believe it or not, teachers, and I'm not being flippant, don't talk to each other. They're in their own room. They see each other maybe in the parking lot, may or may not cross paths in the lunchroom, especially special educators who work through lunch, working on those IEPs. They're not necessarily talking to each other. I've been in buildings where I've been the case manager. I've had children on my caseload, God bless them, something happened, suspension, whatever, no one told me. So again, those teachers, if you have 3 different teachers saying something positive, negative, in the middle, academic performance, keep that. That's a trend. You want to keep that. How does your child work with siblings, cousins, grandparents, neighbors, cooperative? Are they, sitting and doing a board game? Are they helping out, at the table? I always ask those questions in IEP meetings. That tells me a lot about a child. Does the child set the table? Does the child feed the pets? Does your child make their bed? Are they asked to make their bed? Does your child like to, help other people? Some children like to just be outside. Some children are more indoor scholars. All of that is really interesting, important information. Some children, it could be outdoor recess and they want to go help the teacher organize the book. Maybe they're just indoor scholars. That's an important thing. So at home, if their siblings always want to go out and do this and that, or vice versa, they want to be outside or inside. Maybe they get tired at a certain point of the day, like on a Saturday. That's important. Any health information obviously is important. Observed and stated preferences, and we'll get to interviews in a second. What does your child seem like they like? Maybe they're not coming out and saying, I really like helping in the kitchen. I really like watching animal videos. I really like doing science homework. Write that down. Again, one sentence. It could be on a Friday for maybe Friday's the worst day of the week. Saturday morning, just find those little snippets of time and just jot those data points down. Like I said, observations from others. Somebody's like, wow, I've really noticed so-and-so has become so much more blank, responsible, outgoing, or the opposite sometimes. Maybe there's something going on, unfortunately, in school. This is a reality where maybe they have something going on with a peer and they're becoming more withdrawn. That's important information. Next slide, please. These are some areas that are important because a lot of times, we've talked about as a society coming off of virtual learning, that teachers are trying to connect more, social. I don't want to say social emotional learning for this slide because that's much more, in terms of counseling and things like that. Knowing what the child likes is huge. And often we don't know what they like or what they're good at until we interview them. And by interview, it could mean you type up 10 questions in a Google Doc, and over the month of February, you ask them yes or no questions and you type the answers. Children don't want to sit and answer these questions. I know that, but you could I didn't want to give different examples of interviews because I've done them. I've usually tailored them either for an age level or, a group of students. If you know a student really likes the ocean, really likes science, really likes travel, whatever, where would you want to go when you're 30? When I was doing warm-ups, when I taught virtually, I wanted to have warm-ups where there was no academic demand, and I would get an answer out of my year I taught virtually was 8th grade English. Some of those scholars were not that excited about virtual, so I had to be a little more animated. And I would ask things like, what car do you want when you're 30? And either you might have pictures up there, or I would give them 4 choices. Answer is, newsflash, almost all of them wanted a Tesla. It was really cute. I was going, that's great. You keep going, get that Tesla, whatever you want. But asking those yes or no questions, on a Saturday, if they could go any place, would they go to the mall, the zoo? Would they go to, Saturday school? Ask, and then you find process of elimination. You find what they like and what they don't like. And that's really important going into these IEP meetings. Children with disabilities and without disabilities are not monolithic. They're not one-dimensional. So much is going on with these scholars. The more information you present to a team, the more they go, wow. I had a young lady in my advisory. It was 9th grade. It was Howard County High School. She wasn't on an IEP. It's quiet, just as the littlest mouse, just quiet, quiet, quiet. She was in my advisory more than 1 year. Not only did she ask me to write her college recommendation, which I was surprised at because I didn't feel like I knew her that well, but I had known her since 9th grade. She was on the state championship step team. When I tell you that blew me away, that she was just so quiet and shy. And I remember someone going, well, so-and-so is on this. And I said, no. She just literally like almost invisible, sweet as pie. And I'm going, again, I had never asked her about what she was doing on a weekend. And often it was because the other friends and scholars who were more attention seeking were telling me about their weekend. So again, trying to get information out of some of these friends and scholars. We have to stop and pause and ask them. And then we're surprised often. We're surprised at who wants to read about sea animals, who wants to be a chef, who wants to, work in a vet's office. We don't know until we ask. So take some time for a 1 month period, type up 10 questions, yes or no. Maybe some children like, I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? You can, it would be easier and less of a demand, or a lot of them where they just pick a picture, what would you rather do on a Saturday? And this can be as we're moving towards our transition, as our children are turning 14 and we're starting to work on, what are their long-term goals and plans? What are their preferences? Let's respect their preferences. Let's give them acknowledge that everyone has a preference. We have to pull it out of them. Next slide, please. I went over this a lot in a prior slide, that they still get credit when they're doing it at home, when they're showing this. Because when I was thinking, I was like, why would some children demonstrate a skill at home that they don't at school? And again, if you get the doubting staff, still give your child credit. And I was looking at sort of like home, for lack of a better word, accommodations, environment. Often parents want their child to finish their homework by a certain time, but then the parent's distracted, something's going on. Oh, okay. The child's like, I'm still working, I need more time. Often they're sitting where they want to sit. Kitchen table, in their room, in the living room, wherever. They've had their snack, they've got their soda, their juice, their water. They went to Starbucks. They've had their break. They're in familiar surroundings. They're comfortable. Maybe they change into their sweatpants. They're getting encouragement. Maybe you're doing dishes going, come on, keep going. You can do it. They have their visual cues. They have something there. They can take out their homework folder. They can look, they can see. They have these, they're reminded of knowledge that they showed previously. Oh, you can do that. You did something like that yesterday. So if your child needs all of these things to complete a task and the school is saying, no, 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 we haven't seen this. Well, maybe some of these things need to be in their IEP. Maybe they're already in their IEP. We have to document and make sure that the child knows. The child knows, yeah, you can, because a lot of children with and without a disability do not have the, I'm not even sure of what the word is, that they feel that they have the I don't even know what the word is, that they have permission, for lack of a better word, to go, you know what, I need a break. A lot of adults don't do that. I remember I was in a special ed IEP training in one school system, and it was a 4-hour morning session. And I remember thinking, well, I know they're going to stop at 12. I know we're going to have a restroom break. No, they went through 4 hours nonstop, with not even like a 5-minute get up and, whatever. So people were just kind of like popping out to use the, get water or whatever. But again, when adults don't even feel that they have the ability to go, excuse me, I think the group needs a break. Do you think a 10th grader or a 4th grader or a 2nd grader with or without a disability go, excuse me, before I can complete this task, I want to make sure I've had my snack and my water and I'm sitting with my, no. So we have to really do the work for the school staff and go, is this setup optimal opportunity for learning? Because your child is demonstrating that skill at home. So let's duplicate the surroundings. Next slide, please. You don't have to wait for the meeting to obtain information. And what I mean by this is, don't wait for your 5-day document in advance. Always just, send an email, not like, oh, I have to have this today, but say, hey, I'm really interested in any work samples you might have where, we can show that Jillian is able to do the specific math skill, because I'm a little confused. Her grade says this. I've seen this. I think she did this last year. Ask for a rubric. A lot of staff sometimes, especially if they don't teach English, and the rubric is about like grading an essay. I've actually been to trainings where people are going through a rubric, like trying to decide, okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. What does this rubric mean? What are mechanics? What do they mean by elaboration? So ask those questions if you have any level of confusion, because you don't want to wait for that document 5 days in advance of the annual review and then go, the work samples I've been getting don't show this, or I don't have any data on this specific skill. Ask it throughout the year. And it doesn't have to be, dear Miss Sampson, I need a copy of every math quiz that Melanie has taken in the last 3 months by the end of the day tomorrow. I don't mean that. I mean, hey, Miss Sampson, I'm just curious, as you see this IEP goal being demonstrated in the next couple weeks during math, would you feel, just when you have a moment, just please make a copy and then send it to me in 2 weeks. One is a request that's manageable, that the teacher is able to accommodate and plan for. And one is a little more difficult if that teacher hasn't been saving all that data. And I have to acknowledge, they're teaching other children. So if you give them some advance notice and ask for that data, the likelihood of receiving a response is going to go up. Next slide, please. Why your data is so important. So many IEP meetings, there's that little section, parent input here. Or, do you have any questions, parents? No. I'm not faulting parents for saying no. Maybe they truly don't have any questions. Don't feel like you're being I don't want to say overstepping your bounds or pushing your way into the document. Your data belongs. What you see helps the team. The team includes you. I know that's cliche. I know some schools may or may not be as great about that philosophy of parent inclusion as other schools, but your data is so valuable. The zooming out data. Well, I remember when Mikey was able to do the skill in language arts, and now, he's not doing it as much. And again, they may ask questions. Well, we don't see that at school, but you see that at home, and that's valid. You may have seen a different related service provider access something where, someone was able to show a skill. Maybe this one, maybe it's the room they're in. Maybe there's a peer sitting next to them that they don't feel as comfortable with sharing. Maybe there's been a sub there. Maybe the rapport for whatever reason. When you see data across settings, you see your child do something, problem solving, maybe, Rubik's Cube, doing something, being interested in a book, being interested in a certain subject area, and you see this in multiple settings, speak up. And then you have, of course, their data at home, and then preferences. Even sports. I think sports, and I was an athlete. Yes, Division III cross country. Thank you very much. I think sports is one of the best hooks for a lot of our friends and scholars. A lot of them have preferences. And when you tap into that, one of my favorite and most fun things to do my last year of in-person teaching, any child that walked by with a football jersey, I would say, I like your Green Bay Packers jersey, and it didn't matter what it was. It could be the Washington Commanders, the Raiders. I would always say, I like your Green Bay Packers jersey, and they turn around and go, Miss Capone, this is not a Green Bay Packers jersey. I'd say, yes, it is. I love that. That's great. We like the same team. We would start a conversation. They would say, there was one young man, I'll never forget. He's like, I can't stand the Packers. I'd say, okay, give me 2 reasons why. And he'd name the reasons. Then I would say to him, wow, you're really good at citing data. You're really good at naming reasons. When we get to that activity in English next week, you're going to use that skill. So now I've learned the child doesn't like the Green Bay Packers. He watches sports. He's able to cite data. And he was actually very, very much of an expert on a different team. Again, it was just one question on a preference, and it opened up a whole world of data. And I would do that in the hall with one young lady walked by. Her mom had definitely very, very high paying job, and she was not in my grade. And I would say, hi, Sensei. I'd say, oh, that's a nice backpack or whatever. Another teacher one day came out in the hall and said, so-and-so? Again, child was not on an IEP or anything. I said, yeah, we talk in the hall. She's like, well, could you come in and talk to her for me? She's really giving me a problem. And I see her talk to you, and I know you guys get along. Again, literally from me saying once or twice, oh, those are really cute shoes. That really, your outfit, you look very professional today. Just have that. And then she's, oh, wow, yeah, I love these shoes. So hearing their preferences, having that sort of validation, it sounds very cliche, but it's so valuable, and there's so much mileage. Find out what those children like. It could be literally what their favorite snack is. In advisory one year, for whatever reason, the children just couldn't get their days and their planets aligned for us to do a potluck. They were all like, we just want to bring money and order a pizza. So I was like, no, we'll figure it out. So one day I'm like, I'm just going to order you guys Qdoba. I'll take care of it. And it was just such a nice lunch because they each talked about what they preferred. Oh, well, I don't like the guacamole from blah, blah, blah. Miss Capone thank you so much, or my mom cooks like this, and my mom's favorite restaurant is this. And do you all know the Qdoba over at this? It started conversations. And I thought, you just don't know what these children like until you start that initial conversation. And it gives you an avenue into finding so much more information about them. So please use that data, whether, whatever it is, it's their favorite color, their favorite team, their favorite dog breed. That's a starting point for more data. And I think we overlook that both as parents and as educators. Next slide, please. I wanted you to make sure you know your goals ahead of time, that you have goals for your child. You want to share your child's strengths. If they say there's no time or it's not relevant, ask for an extension of the meeting on another day. Ask for, you want something to be typed up and included in the IEP, not a separate document. And the question is, why wouldn't they want to give you credit for what your child knows? That's kind of like of course they should. Like I've said, I'm not sure why. It's an assumption that often if we have a child with a disability, the team's like, well, we don't know about that, or that's not consistent. If you think it's consistent, speak up and say something. Next slide, please. I know we're almost out of time. Document their data. If they're speaking very fast, we have this decoding, this decoding, this decoding, this decoding. They're not on grade level. And then, or this comprehension, whatever it is, write that down, collect it, and then feel free to ask them, well, I'm a little confused about that. You have this. And again, it doesn't have to be, what's the word? It doesn't have to be a sort of, you're trying to contradict them or point fingers. Ask them to clarify, because sometimes they may go, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. This column doesn't go with this column. I was talking about this. So just, document what they're sending you to, so that you're just another sort of set of eyes, almost like a proofreader. Almost, maybe you're going to catch something that they didn't, because they're, again, not making excuses. If they have however many students on their caseload and they have these compliance deadlines, they're going to, the mistakes could be made. Next slide, please. And that was it. I wanted to offer time for questions. I hope I gave everybody just a different, slightly different perspective on how I come at, approaching IEPs, and just some tips for you that when you're going into these meetings. I have always had the philosophy that a parent is really the, sort of the center, the key person in these meetings. I want to make you have, give you the confidence that you also feel that way when you're in every meeting that you're in.
Liz, thank you so much for coming tonight. That was a great presentation with so much to think about. I'm wondering, are there any questions from anybody before we sign off? I see here there might be, just a thank you. And I'm also putting in the chat a link for our evaluation form. I hope everybody fills it out, but I will leave some space here just to see. I'll stop sharing to see if anybody has any questions.
Somebody wrote, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm curious, when you suggest engaging an advocate, that is one of those loaded questions that, I always worked as a case manager to have parents feel that, I'm calling them ahead of the meeting. I'm letting them know they're a part of the team. And unfortunately, there are situations out there. I will say this about that. you're going to find people who are going to behave not because they believe they have to behave this way in a school, but because somebody that you're not seeing at the team or an administrator or somebody behind the scenes is kind of directing them. And that's very sad, but I kind of, you know, that is just reality. So that's a very difficult question about engaging an advocate, because I think it would have to be specific goals and specific reasons and sort of exhausting every possible avenue in from different people that you're trying to have somebody at the school level sort of turn a tide. If you know, all members of the school staff are doing XYZ and you're thinking the direction should be over here and they're going in a different direction and you're kind of at an impasse, and you don't see an ally, you don't see somebody who's going, yeah, this is a team decision. It's a team decision. It is a team decision. That's a very difficult question to answer because every situation is different. Some situations, I would say I get calls from people and I turn them down because I think they need an attorney and not an advocate. So it's really a case-by-case situation. So I would just want to say there's no rule of thumb for that. Even as a master's in special ed from Hopkins, former team leader, I had difficulties in Montgomery County and I knew the team leader at the school for my own child. So it's almost like it's a really case-by-case situation. There's really no rule of thumb, I would say.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for coming this evening and giving this presentation. And I do look forward to, and for our night in February, where we're going to have an Ask an Advocate night where people can ask more questions just about the IEP process and all that we've been talking about this evening. So thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you for having me, Brooke. I really appreciate everybody giving up their Wednesday night in January and listening to my perspective. I really appreciate that opportunity.
Well, thank you. And until February, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.